And so I thought I would record the whole thing so that they can watch it later. And so the plan for today's meeting is relatively simple. So we have a few items on the agenda. One, do quick introductions, so you know who's here, not only what the names are and countries, but also perhaps let's say a few words about each other's research interests, so that we can start exploring possible collaboration opportunities to see who does what and who can work with whom. And then I wanted to do a little introduction and overview of the data we have, Xculture data as well as some other data sets we have. And again, that's just to give you an idea as to what's available. Again, you don't have to use these specific data. You're most welcome to use any other data. But let's see. Oh, Ernesto's here. So, so you have an idea as to what kind of data we have, how to navigate them, where to find them, and things like that. Then I wanted to spend a couple of minutes giving you examples of studies that are being developed based on the Xculture data set. And maybe we can have a very quick initial introduction, brainstorming session on possible research papers that you can work on. We don't have to decide on which specific papers we will be pursuing, but at the same time, we may start getting some ideas as to what we can do. And then if we have more time, questions and answers, and perhaps, I don't know, whatever else may come up as we work and discuss. And so I suggest we start with introductions. So one thing I would recommend is, for the clarity of the recording, so if you're not talking, let's mute your microphones. So this way, and you can always unmute it when the time comes. Sometimes we get feedback. So to mute it, you just click on microphone mute. And so this way it would be a better quality of the sound for everyone. And I guess let's start with the introductions. I can say a couple of words of about myself, and then we'll go in random order. I think I've met pretty much all of you, at least to some extent, so you probably know my name, and you know that I'm at the University of North Carolina in Greensboro here in the United States. I'm originally from Ukraine, those who don't know, and it's been quite a few countries and places before I ended up in North Carolina. Notably, I spent some time in Canada, in Calgary, and since we have some Calgarians here, so good connection. And before that, I did my master's in Texas, so University of Texas at Dallas. My specialization research-wise is what you would call cross-cultural management. And so I specialize in basically research in situations where people from different countries come together. Lately, it's been particularly in the virtual context, so global virtual teams, cross-cultural training, as well as a little work on international business education. And yeah, I guess that probably is enough for now. Who wants to go next? Probably would be appropriate. Oh yes, so Abdul or Gongo, you raise your hands. I wanted to torture Ernesto, but we'll get to him in a minute. Okay. So who wants to go next?
Okay, Abdul, go ahead. And then I'll be down after you.
Okay, so my name is Abdul Rahman Shakuni. And I always tell my students, if you cannot pronounce my name, you don't need to be in international business. So I teach at Montreal University in Calgary, Canada. I did my PhD at Concordia University in Canada as well. I did my master in Egypt. Originally from Syria, so but I'm now teaching in Calgary. My research is mainly, it's more strategy, not really micro level, international business, more macro. So, and basically more or less I'm stuck with cross-cultural management, teaching cross-cultural management, and it's not my domain. So it's, and all that Xculture stuff, it's little new to me because I'm not into teams and more like macro level stuff, like country differences, institutional differences, stuff like that. So maybe I'll add some new perspectives or use the data from different perspectives how it's currently used. Yeah, go ahead.
Research has been done in the area of strategy and related disciplines using Xculture data. I'll talk about that more, but it's definitely a possibility.
Okay. So I do work about social network analysis, social network analysis. So if there is networking stuff, that's part of my research, mainly part of my research, and the other parts are not related to X-culture because it's related to multinationals coming from emerging countries.
In fact, research that has been done based on X-culture data was in some way related to multinationals. Again, I'll give a few examples, but for those of you, again, who are also in strategy, we have this interesting combination. So it's a task that is completed in teams. So it may create an impression that it's all about teams, but the task they do is all basically strategy. So the task is almost always, how do you expand into new markets? Mm-hmm. And so they have to decide on the entry mode. They have to decide on alliances. So the task itself is very much strategy. And so there have been attempts to look at how those decisions are made based on either personal biases or cultural differences or team composition. So essentially, we're talking here about strategic decision-making and influences of the team and individual characteristics on those decision-making or decisions. Definitely doable.
Great. And it's 7 a.m. here, so if I'm sleepy, don't.
All right, who goes next?
Okay, I can go. Okay,
right.
My name is Byung-ho Ellie Jin. My first name is Byung-ho, but if you think that's hard to say, you can go by Ellie, which is my new middle name. I'm at Greensboro, so I'm same as Vas. I'm a faculty at University of North Carolina at Greensboro. This is my 9th year in Greensboro. But I'll be moving to North Carolina State University starting next month. So
big loss for us.
Yeah, but same state, but about 1 hour, away from here. That's my affiliation. And I'm originally from Korea, but I've been teaching in the States since 2001. And my area is international retailing, especially focusing on fashion and related industries. So it'll be unique for, I think, amongst us that I'm focusing on a particular industry. And especially I'm looking at fashion industry from the global perspective, like cross-cultural consumer behaviors and cross-cultural consumer behavior understanding. And also I'm looking at from the small and medium-sized enterprise perspective, because many fashion businesses are kind of small than large company, not larger than in large companies. And also I'm looking at branding perspective as well, because in fashion industry, the branding is extremely important. So I'm doing branding studies as well. So what else I'm missing? Branding, globalization, small business, and SME. And also I'm doing a little bit of luxury branding as well. Luxury, in the fashion industry, luxury is pretty big market. So I'm doing that area, a little bit of that area as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we've been on the PhD dissertation committees quite a few times together.
Right.
Several times invited me, and so we've done. The students have done some research, including using data collection through X-culture. So we had to collect did some experiments a couple of times, so helped with some data collection there as well. So, and one thing I would add also, talking about fashion, every semester we would have at least one company that makes clothing, apparel. So we had one, for example, that was making raincoats and jackets. We had one that was making kind of Spanish version of Baby Gap, or Gap Kids, whatever the name. Mm-hmm. So I think we can look at some of those decisions that the teams made with respect to the clothing companies, and maybe potentially can think about some studies specifically on fashion there as well.
Oh, speaking of emerging countries, like Abdul said, my specialty is helping U.S. companies to go to international markets. So one of them is emerging markets. So I specialize in China, India, and Vietnam, those emerging markets, because I see, those markets are huge opportunities for U.S. companies. So, and also there are many emerging countries who want to export to international markets. So I'm helping, from the both sides.
Yeah, so it kind of becomes a little bit strategy too, right?
Right, exactly. Like entry mode decision and understanding consumers and entry mode decision and timing as well. and or the market structure, a little bit,
Yep, yep.
So, also a strategy perspective as well. One of my recent paper is about Born Global and probably accepted by International Marketing Review. So, that's about small business in South Korea. So, and they are basically born global and going international pretty soon as soon as their establishment. So that is also kind of a strategy perspective.
Right. Yeah. Also, an interesting fact about Beyond Gold, those who don't know, the Xculture's accountant is Beyond Gold's husband. And it's important. So he is a very instrumental person to our project. And what's especially admirable is that he took us on even before we could pay him. So he helped us register the company, set up the accounts. And then literally for the first, I don't even know how long, he was basically helping us with accounting services free of charge. And then at some point we could offer a little honorarium, but he still does most of the work basically below the market value just because he likes us, I guess, or I don't know. So
yeah, because we like you.
Yes, but it is huge help, and so I really appreciate his help. And hopefully he will also be in Italy, so there is a possibility, so you may be able to meet him.
Yeah.
So if you need a good accountant in the United States, his firm offers all kinds of services. So definitely recommend.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So with your permission, maybe we should go to Ernesto next.
Yes.
Ernesto is the most important person when it comes to the Xculture Symposium in Macerata. So
I am not.
He's the host.
Yes. Yes, maybe I can intervene at this stage. So thank you for coming to Macerata. I am very happy about your decision to attend this symposium. We are deep in the organization right now. I met the rector today that promised to visit us on the welcoming reception and the following day. Regarding the hackathon, I still don't know how much time I will have in order to attend the event in Macerata, but I really actually would like to do so. And maybe my main purpose regarding the hackathon is actually an old paper that I have about cohesiveness and performance in global virtual teams that I've been working for a number of years. Maybe the hackathon could be an opportunity to find a partner, an academic partner, to move on that paper, because right now we had a larger team at the beginning, and now it is just me, Livio, and us. We actually are waiting for some more data about the cohesiveness, that we have to identify a variable in the data set that actually can measure what we mean for cohesiveness in order to try to investigate. I thought it was a fascinating topic in the beginning. I think it is. It is actually the paper. Actually, a paper is ready basically, but maybe it needs some refining and maybe some new data in order to do additional tests. So right now it is sort of on a dead end, but I would like to find a publication for it. So this is actually the main topic. I have also been working in Xculture for the other colleagues also in another area that is actually the paper about ranking and performance. That is an effort of many Xculture colleagues, and now we did a submission, and this is another area. And my other research contribution is about experiential learning in the volume that we published a couple of years ago. And I really would like to be involved in the new edition that is coming out. That's regarding my purposes, my objectives for the hackathon. But again, I still don't know how much time I will have to attend. Let's see, but I really would like to. I like the presentation by Ellie. I know you have been working with Elena Cedrola, that is a colleague of mine here in Macerata. Is it true? I have seen that you have been writing with her, and she will be at the event. And I have to say that I've been also writing about fashion and internationalization of fashion industries in the past. So this is also a topic that is very interesting for me, and it is also very relevant for this area for Macerata. So I have been interested in fashion in the past, and for Saturn I will be interested in fashion in the future. I have also been writing in a number of topics about innovation management, SMEs, and also the governance of higher education institutions, and also about strategy and vision of higher education institutions, the linkages between higher education institutions and the economy. But maybe this is not at the very core of its culture data set, and on the opposite, cohesiveness for certain is. Maybe that's the most important information about myself. Here in Macerata, I teach international marketing, international business strategy, and I also have a course, a basic course, let's say, at the bachelor level in management of enterprises. And maybe that's it. If you have any questions, I'm here.
Well, I can only say that I have worked with Ernesto on a number of papers now. And so he's very skilled methodologically. So when it comes to analysis, doesn't shy away from doing some time-consuming work. Sometimes there would be co-authors who sort of, sign up to work as a co-author, but then try to avoid actual work. Ernesto has done huge amounts of work in general. And recently, for example, I discovered that he did for one study much more work than anyone on the team has had ever known. For example, for the study on the impact of the university prestige on student performance, Ernesto was responsible for compiling data on participating universities. And I thought it was just a couple of clicks to download the data. And just recently I discovered that it had to be done manually. And so I can only imagine how much time it took. So that's kind of a new level of appreciation for his contribution to that study.
I have to say it has been actually a very time-consuming paper. So let's hope we will reach actually an end.
Yeah.
So the analysis has been especially tough because we have been running the analysis so many times with so many data sets, especially the moderation and the mediation test. But I think it is a great research experience, and I really hope it is going to reach publication soon. Together with my cohesiveness paper that I am very anxious to find.
Yeah, I hope it will not make you feel bad, but 3 days ago, my IT guy wrote some code that crawled through that Webometrics website and downloaded all the data automatically.
Oh,
So,
I don't want to know.
you found a way to get it.
The most time-consuming part was probably about the analysis of moderation and mediation. That one was, yes.
We found a way to get all those data, so now we have a nice database. The only thing is that the data always changes, so we'll have to do it from time to time. But yes. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Ernesto. So, Byung-go, yes.
Yes, Ernesto, I was at the University of Macerata in spring 2016.
Yeah.
Yes, I know. But I didn't meet you, so I will meet you.
But this time I will meet you. So I'm so excited, about going back.
Yes.
One thing that I should also note, and we will get to the other introductions in a second, but it's interesting that, so here we have 7 people, right? And there are 2 more missing. We don't have 2 people from the same country. I think Ernesto may be the only person who is an Italian in Italy. Everybody else is somewhere else, like a Ukrainian in the United States, a British French in China, and then surprisingly, even though we are all around the world, at the same time, there are so many connections. So like, for example, Ernesto and Byung-go did research in the same area, even though they never met. I went to the school in Calgary where Abdul is now. It's a global community, but it's a very interconnected.
Very interesting. Yes.
I have to say I am the most strange person in the Academy of International Business because I was born in this area and I am in the university in this area and I am very rooted in my place.
Right. Yeah.
I leave the world.
Well, but you teach all around the world, so I know Ernesto has multiple engagements all around Europe, but as well as I've seen him at conferences literally all around the world. So you're an Italian who probably spends half of your time traveling anyway. So yeah. All right. Well, let's move on. Who goes next?
Okay. So
to be clear, I'm in China because I'm following my wife, who is from Beijing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, your case is special. So we'll get to Mark. I mean, Mark is a fascinating person. So I've known him also for many years. So Muhammad or Mark, who's going to go? Muhammad, let's do you and Mark.
So my name is Muhammad Ayaz. You can call me Ayaz. I'm teaching at Institute of Business Administration here in Karachi, Pakistan. So I did my PhD in management from here, one of the topmost universities here in Pakistan, Lahore University of Management Sciences. My area is basically in global value chains. I work in global value chains. And in this area, my research interest is basically I'm looking at that how developing country firms who participate in global value chains. So what are the implications for participating in global value chains? Basically, I'm focusing on economic upgrading in global value chains, and also what are the implications for workers. So social upgrading in global value chains. So I'm working in this area, and also CSR in global value chains is also another area which I'm interested in. I'm working with various brands as a consultant as well, some US and European brands who are sourcing from South Asia. And specifically, I'm focusing on clothing apparel value chain. So my research is specifically on the apparel value chain, and also the brands that I work with, they are in this area. One is in sportswear, New Balance is in sportswear, so I also work with them, helping them to monitor their value chain, their suppliers here, and working with them to improve working conditions in their factory. So this is my interest and area where I work. So in teaching, I teach international business. Previously, I started my teaching in business school at LUMS, where I did my PhD, and later on moved to IBA, which is here in Karachi. So in both places, I was teaching international business, and I am participating in Xculture from last almost, I think, 4 years now.
Maybe even longer, yeah.
Yeah. So, but on the research side, this was my laziness. So I received many times calls to join research hackathons and work with Xculture dataset. But this is first time where I'm getting involved in that. My work mainly is qualitative in nature. I'm not a quant guy. So previously I understand all those stuff, but of course I have not done it. So there's no hands-on experience. But my thesis and later on my work is qualitative in nature. I published recently in Human Relations one paper. Another one is again in the review in Human Relations. So again, it's about how global structures are restructuring the work relations in developing countries, and what are its implications for workers. So this is something which I'm doing right now. I have some background in social theory. So organization theory is one area where, of course, I had a lot of grounding. So in social theory, I have interest. So whatever research I get involved in, I can help out if there are something can be done on the theoretical front. So this is a brief intro about myself.
Thank you, Ayaz. I will also say that Ayaz is a perfect example of an Xculture professor, let's call it this way, from the perspective that he has been participating in the project for many years. He said 4 years. I have a feeling it's been actually more, but it's the first time we actually see each other. So we never met face to face. And so there are about 14 professors at this time who have participated. I've met some in person, like obviously I know Ernesto and Mark and Yongo very well. Then there are some whom I at least met in a video call at least once or twice. But there are many people with whom we have exchanged by now probably thousands of emails, like literally thousands. And that's the first time I meet them or haven't met at all yet. So this opportunity to meet face-to-face in Italy will be also a very important one, because, you know, once you meet the person, the relationship becomes much closer, and, you know, you all of a sudden, it's much easier to work together. So glad about this opportunity.
All right.
All right, so we have a couple more people. Who goes next? Mark, you wanna?
Yeah, okay, so I'm Mark Idelson, as Vaz explained. So I have an international background from birth. I won't go into too many details, but all of my higher education, on the other hand, is from France. And my initial training was in two engineering areas: pure mathematics and computer graphics, which is also pure math. And then I worked for 25 years. And I started my PhD when I was 43.
Oh.
So I'm no longer a young doctor, I guess, because I earned my PhD in 2011. But after I earned my PhD, I moved from France to China, and I've been essentially teaching management, mostly entrepreneurship. But because of the, let's say, the shape of the Chinese student body, I've had to develop other teaching materials because there was no demand for entrepreneurship in the Chinese institutions I joined. And I won't go into the details because every case is different. Anyway, so I developed a cross-cultural management course where the practical exercise is X-Culture. I first taught this at Peking University, and now I've also introduced it to Nottingham University on their mainland China campus. I also have in my teaching portfolio leadership and business ethics. And I also did shorter workshops on consulting skills and so on and so forth, because but you could say that those are part of the toolkit of any entrepreneur. Anyway, so after my professional experience, and to give you an idea of that, my last job in industry was internal advisor for a large French bank on all ICT adoption for the 60 lines of business of the bank in question. So I brought to the field of management my background in being very computer savvy. So once again, I don't want to go into prehistory, but I started programming in 1974. Wow. I'm sure some of you weren't born that year. So I climbed that particular mountain on foot before there were helipads and so on. So I'm a digital dinosaur in some respect. So for me, on the teaching side, I used X-Culture as a device to get my students to experientially learn to cope in cross-cultural settings. It wasn't about, the IB plan was the MacGuffin, so to speak. The IB plan, that is the exercise. I didn't teach like others, a strategic international business course with that as a practical application. So anyway, that's enough about the teaching. So my research, I have two main lines of research. The first one is knowledge management, and it's knowledge management as applied epistemology, and specifically comparative Sino-Western applied epistemology. So in other words, what I do is that I study how Chinese and Western thinkers build knowledge, represent knowledge, and make decisions differently. And that's basically my dissertation. I basically convinced HEC Paris, then Peking University, then Nottingham University, to pay me to better understand my wife. So I have a job for life, as it's a moving target, as I'm sure many of you have experienced in your neck of the woods.
Did you get the IRB approval to study, to subject your wife to the experiments and?
Oh no! I mean, she's not part of. No, I don't experiment on her.
You only do the observations.
No. I'm being very oblique, which is a very Chinese tactic, actually. No. Actually, well, we don't have time to go into the methods. Okay, we'll talk about this in Italy.
So when you changed the vowel,
so
did it include the informed consent form and a check mark for being, you know?
We'll discuss this at the wine.
I got married in Paris. It's a very Latin country, you know. Contracts don't matter. and China, it's the same. So your question indicates that you're from an Anglo-Saxon formal economy.
Well, yeah.
And you know, it's not the contract that matters. You know, I've been married. We've been married for 26 years. So I can tell you that the work is not over.
The work is not over. Mark, I don't know. I take you as my husband and agree to be your study subject until death parts us.
No. What I mean is that I noticed a long time ago, and I know some of my students, my male students, have still yet to identify this. But above every woman's shoulders is a head.
Okay.
So she can walk away anytime she wants. If she's staying, is that she's decided to.
Well, hopefully you treat her well. So.
And vice versa. Anyway, so that's my first area, and I've extended it to compare other branches of philosophy. So I have comparative Sino-Western applied philosophy of logic, and probably more interesting, perhaps for some of your research streams, comparative Sino-Western applied philosophy of ethics. And my goal moving forward for the next 10 years, 12 years, is to explore other philosophies from around the world and see how they would enrich the framework I've developed so far, just comparing essentially Greek philosophy and Chinese philosophy. So that's my first research stream. The second one is something that you won't be interested in, so I'll go very quickly. The social construction of mathematics. In other words, the society is shaped by the math they know. So a society that knows black skulls will have its monetary flows move differently, and so that will reshape society. A society that knows SNA, graph theory, and applies it will also be reshaped by this knowledge, and so on. So, and I won't go into that more. We can probably have a long evening discussion one evening for those who are tempted to explore this. So that's it for the research topics. In terms of methods, what I bring, since I come from pure mathematics, I'm very constructivist in my approach, which means that I tend to build the math I need based on the phenomena I observe, rather than use existing toolkits, because I can't be certain that they're the appropriate one for the situation. So I also bring to the table the SNA techniques that Abdul mentioned, which are just a perspective, although I've been working more on the micro and meso level than the macro level that he's probably. I even have a conference paper at Sunbelt last year, which is the main SNA conference in the world, where I talk about social network analysis, and my unit of analysis are meanings. So they're just like we carry genes, and humans can be considered as the vessels by which genes perpetuate themselves. Well, we also carry in our cognition meanings, and it's interesting to look at the social network perspective on how meanings connect to each other. And essentially, my paper is a very small contribution where I offer a method to detect visually cognitive dissonance in discourse.
Very nice.
I won't go any further in that. So this is how I can help any research paper we decide to cluster together around. insights on applied philosophy with a cross-cultural perspective, SNA methods. I also have my own X-Culture project, but I'm not certain that this hackathon will be the right place to move it forward, but we can also discuss that. And if you want to know more, you can go to the page that describes it. Basically, there's a gap in the literature, in the SNA literature, at the level of team, small group behavior. Most of the literature is on positive ties.
Yeah.
So negative ties are very interesting because sometimes an outcome can be predicted more from the negative ties than from the positive ties in the group. And we do have people who are voted out or conflicts within groups in X-Culture. And so I identified that that might be fertile ground for a paper but that's all described in the X-Culture website. So I won't say anymore. Read that and contact me. And but I'm not necessarily pushing that forward for this exercise next month, because I know this is very peripheral to the concerns of the X-Culture research community.
Yeah, I will only add that having known Mark for many years, he's probably the biggest, what's the word, polymath in the X-Culture team. So most people in our group are either, one specific discipline, and Mark is a programmer, a philosopher, a mathematician, an international business researcher. Methodologically, he does all kinds of things from network analysis to simpler to qualitative. So definitely could be useful if you want to venture kind of off the beaten path and do something interesting. So we have Natalia. Oh, yes. Yeah. Did you want to say something, Mark? I think your microphone is muted.
So I just wanted to say that I'm probably more confused than you are, because I can't be single-minded as you are.
All right, so we have two more people here and one more is missing. So let's do quick introductions, Natalia and then Anna, and then talk a little bit more about possible research ideas. So Natalia, the most important person in this group, I'll tell you why in a second. So.
Okay, so I am a PhD student of Silesian University in Poland, and I'm on the last stage of this study, and my interests focus on tourism management, especially on roots tourism and diaspora tourism and ancestral tourism and such kind of international tourism.
So yes, she does research basically on international tourism, and by diaspora tourism, I hope you understand that's basically, immigrants going back to their country of origin or country of their parents for sentimental reasons. So it's a very interesting topic. We even tried to work on a paper. The reason she's so special, she happens to also be my niece. And in this case, it has no relation. I mean, it just happened to be the case. But yes, that's the daughter of my sister. So we grew up pretty much separate. So she was born right around the time when I left Ukraine. So we haven't really ever spent much time together. But she just happened to go independently in academia and did her master's and then PhD in international tourism, essentially. And so now we started working together as colleagues, and then like, oh, isn't that my niece? Yeah, actually it is. So, but yeah, I guess here it's a more professional relationship than the blood connection. So, but yes, we are immediate relatives. So yeah, it just happened to be the case. And so yes, she has some very interesting studies going on that I'm hoping maybe some of you will be willing and interested to join. In my opinion, or in my assessment, they not only will be publishable in top journals, but also will probably make a huge impact on the field. And so Natalia approached me with a request for help or collaboration, but the area is not exactly my area, but I know some of you would be much, much closer involved in those areas and perhaps can join as co-authors and help us polish that study or studies and bring them up to the level where they would be publishable in top journals. So some fascinating work. And what I like especially about this work, again, the best papers come from kind of cross-disciplinary research. And so here you have something that is international, but not exactly international as teams, more international as policy for tourism, strategy for tourism companies. So it seems like we have enough connection to work together, yet also enough diversity to come up with something drastically new. So very interesting stuff. All right. And so Anna, can you talk? We saw you for a second and then you disappeared. Again, those of you who have been in the project longer probably know Anna already. Yes. Hi, Anna. Go ahead. Your microphone, yes. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm here. I'm from Russia, and I hope that nothing happens in upcoming 2 weeks, so I will be in Macerata, because we had, until the last minute, I can't positively confirm that I will be there, but it looks like 95% I will be.
Good, 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 good.
That was a short introduction, so maybe I should say a few more words. Again, Anna has been involved in Xculture for many years and has been working on a number of projects with us, has done a lot of research and analysis, especially for us, notably lately on this study on rankings. So she's very, very strong methodologically. And again, if you will ever have Anna as a co-author, again, she's one of those people who gets the work done. So if she becomes a co-author, she will not shy away from work, and definitely very, very reliable. Also, Anna has been involved a little bit in the new track of Xculture. Those of you who know that we test in the children's version of the project. So we had about 100 kids last semester. And so Anna, as a professor, as a department chair, as an administrator, participates in the project with the students. But also she had a class of younger people last semester, like 16-year-olds or something like that. Apparently she also has some connections with local schools, as well as mentors those children. And so that was big help for us on that front. So hugely appreciate the help in that area. All right, so let's talk a little bit about possible studies and the format of this hackathon. Just a couple of words about what to expect. So we have done the hackathon a few times already. And so the last one was in Wisconsin, at the University of Wisconsin at La Crosse, just a few weeks ago. It turned out to be very, very successful and productive. So we didn't expect such a nice outcome, but it was a slightly different format in Wisconsin. So what we did there was, there were about 10 of us, 12, but one got sick and couldn't come last minute, and one arrived and then had a family emergency, had to leave. So there were 10 left for the duration of the hackathon. That one was a little different than the one we will have in Italy. We didn't have anything else other than the hackathon. And so literally we switched off our phones, and for 5 days we locked ourselves up in a dormitory, and 8 a.m. till midnight basically did research and nothing else. It was extremely productive. So there were 5 papers that we started working with, and then eventually converged on 3. And by the end of the event, we had not quite written up papers, but we have done enough to go home just to do some additional polishing and run a clean set of analyses and get the clean set of results. And so we were able to accomplish, based on our estimate, probably what would have taken about half a year to do virtually. The way we did it in Wisconsin was that we would have 3 teams working more or less in the same room, but we had several labs available to us. And so we would have meetings probably about every 40 minutes within the team, and probably about every 3 hours or so between the teams. And so the process went like this. So you would think of something, you present it, you get immediate feedback, criticism, you go work some more on it, you come back, you present, you get feedback, you go back. So since it was only 3 projects that we eventually worked on, it was possible to do those presentations all the time and get feedback. And we figured that each of those discussion sessions probably would have taken a Skype conversation. And so since you cannot have Skype calls more frequently than, I don't know, once a week or so, since over these few days, we had at least 20, 30 meetings, presentations, feedback, discussions, brainstorming, redoing the analysis. It seems like it would have taken probably 20, 30 weeks to complete the same amount of work that we were able to complete in Wisconsin. And as I said, we were not able to finish the papers completely, obviously, so it still requires some work. But at the same time, it seems like we were able to get the most important thing done, which is think of the paper idea, develop the design, refine the design based on the criticism, run the initial tests and confirm that the data show us or tell us what we thought it would tell. And then we even had some time to do some literature search and, you know, put the paper outlines together. So as I said, now it's a matter of actually doing the work of writing the paper. But now that everything's worked out, it's relatively easy to do it virtually. Now, before that, we had a hackathon like this one in Miami. And so that one was a little different. And so I think that the one in Italy will be more like the one in Miami. We will have several things going on at the same time. So we will have all those company visits. We will have meetings with the local entrepreneurs, and then all the sessions that some of you are involved in, either as coaches or as judges or organize those sessions. And so we will not be able to devote 10 hours a day to research. Instead, we will have a meeting every day or almost every day. I think there will be one day when we'll have so much going on that we will not be able to have a research meeting. But we will have a formal meeting almost every day, a couple of hours devoted to research. And then obviously we will have some free time every day where you can work on those ideas on your own before you present them to the group next time. And so the goal or the expectations for this hackathon should be that we will not go home with the finished papers, but instead we will go home with very clear ideas as to what you want to do, a co-author or co-authors from perhaps this group if you want to work in a group, a nice clear research design, again, not only developed but also criticized multiple times, and then as a result refined and you know, finalized hopefully, and maybe some ideas or something on the paper as far as the outline for the paper. We probably will not be able to do much with the data themselves. I don't think we will have much time to actually run the tests, but at the same time, we should be able to decide on what data you will be using and maybe even extract the data set from the Xculture database and maybe even, you know, have a look so you know what variables are there, what to do with them. We can have one-on-one meetings with me or maybe Justin, who will be online and available, who is managing the data set, so that you can you know, clarify what each variable represents, how it was collected or measured. So you will have probably the foundation, and then going home, you will have to actually execute the study. Again, my forecast is that it would be something that if we had to do it virtually, it would take, again, maybe up to a dozen meetings. And so it would probably take up to, I don't know, several months of communication. And one of the problems communicating online is that you have long breaks between the meetings. So each time you have the next meeting, it takes some time to, you know, remember what we talked about last time, where we stand. Whereas here, the meetings happen every day or even sometimes several times during the day. It's a much more efficient process. It's like, you know, a truck moving up the hill. If you stop, it's very hard to get up to speed again. So here you kind of keep moving all the time. So that's the expectation. And so one thing I would like to also say is that this time we also would like to try not to limit ourselves to the Xculture data. So we will definitely make the data available. You're most welcome and strongly encouraged to use Xculture data. I mean, that would be my preference, that you use our data. But I think this time, since we will not be doing any, or will not have much time to do any analyses while at the spot at the meeting, I think it would be perfectly acceptable if you wanted to venture off and maybe think about using some other data, maybe archival data, maybe one of you has your own data sets, or maybe even collecting new data, again, using the Xculture platform or some other methods. It seems to me that there are enough interesting topics here in the group, like some of you are doing research specifically on strategy, some of you are more in tourism. And so if there would be interest in working together, again, it doesn't have to be specifically using the Xculture data that we collected using our student teams. It's perfectly fine if you decided to write a paper together using some other foundation, and you can still present those papers or paper ideas, still get feedback from the group, still refine the analysis, just use a different database. So don't feel like you're limited to a specific set of variables that we have available through the Xculture project. So let me give you a few examples of the papers that have been done or are being done based on the Xculture data, so you have some idea as to what's possible. But then maybe we will have a couple more minutes to maybe exchange some initial ideas as to what we might work on. So most of the papers, as you probably know, are on specifically teams. And so we had enough papers of that kind dealing with issues like, for example, Ernesto mentioned cohesion. So why some teams are more cohesive than others, feel kind of closer together. And in turn, what does it lead to? Do teams that are more cohesive, do they perform better? Are they more satisfied? Are they writing better reports and things like that? A lot of studies on, for example, leadership. Again, do teams that have a leader, do they perform better than teams that don't have a leader? Or do teams, or why some teams have a leader? Is it cultural, is it team composition, or is it completely random? Communication, why some teams choose to use Skype and Google Docs and others stick with email. And then those that choose to communicate with video and audio, are they happier? Are they more cohesive, for example? Are they writing a better report? Are they meeting deadlines better? So things like that. We did some studies, or are trying to do some studies on, for example, peer evaluations. So in some teams, people give everybody 5 and seem to be happy. In other teams, some people give some team members high grades and some team members low grades. So the question then becomes why some people use one peer evaluation style, maybe more strict, maybe more lenient, maybe differentiate more across team members and so on, write more feedback. And others maybe, give everyone the same grade. So is it again cultural? Is it age? Is it background? And then on the other side of the equation, so in the teams that use one style, do they perform better than other teams? We also started doing a study here in Wisconsin on supervisor evaluations. Again, at the end of the project, professors have to evaluate the reports from the students, from the teams that their students were members of. Again, some professors are strict, some are lenient, some differentiate a lot across teams, give some teams low grades, others high grades, others give everyone the same grade. Some tend to stick closer to the middle point on the evaluation scale. Others are more extreme in their evaluations. Again, why? Is it culture? Is it experience? Is it pedigree, academic pedigree? And then vice versa. So do those teams that get more feedback from the professors, do those teams that get higher evaluations, do they perform better or worse? So things like that. Then, so that's one stream. So anything related to teams and what's happening in the teams. Another line of research, and I think somebody mentioned qualitative research. Mohammed, I believe Ayaz said that. We have tons, like literally tens of thousands of pages of qualitative data. At the end of each week, teams write, or people, students write comments about their experiences that week. And then at the end of the project, they write even more. And so nobody has ever analyzed those data. So we look at them mainly to identify problems and try to help the teams. But I bet there is a lot of data, a lot of useful stuff in those qualitative comments. From things like, for example, do people from different cultures comment on different things? Maybe, I don't know, Asians being more collectivist, perhaps they comment more on interpersonal relationships. And maybe Westerners being more task-oriented comment more on the task. Who knows? We don't know. But we can look at how those comments evolve over time, for example. Do people express different concerns in the beginning of the project versus middle versus end? Again, is it cultural? Is it age? Is it university prestige? Is it something else? So lots of data, lots of comments, and nobody has ever analyzed it. Not to mention that there you can also have some logic and some explanations as to why, for example, the team made certain strategic choices as to the market, entry mode, pricing strategy. Again, if you are into qualitative research, we have literally tens of thousands of pages, maybe even hundreds of thousands of pages of text, and nobody really analyzed it. Obviously, we can also use the database for education research, even though the task is the strategy and the project is completed in teams. But ultimately, it is an educational project. And so we can do a lot of research on whether or not, for example, experiential learning helps learning. Does it affect student satisfaction? Does it affect learning? Does it affect their attitudes, stereotypes over time? So it could be all kinds of papers for journals like Journal of Higher Education or Academy of Management, Learning and Education, and so on and so on. Finally, strategy. So we've had a few papers done specifically on strategy. So for example, we had a student from the Netherlands who did a study trying to see how personal biases and preferences for country image essentially affect entry choices. Bjorn Goe actually has done some research with her students where they looked at how country image affects purchasing decisions. So brands from, let's say, if I remember correctly, it was from France or from Italy, versus brands from China. You know, same pictures, they did some experiments and tried to see if students are more open to buying brands of, let's say, French companies versus brands of Chinese companies, even though the quality of the product is the same. Here, the student from the Netherlands looked at, so we asked students what countries they sort of like or dislike or perceive as prestigious versus maybe not as cool. And then she was trying to see if they would select markets for those countries based on those biases. And sure enough, she found that even though students believe that they make the choices based on economic analysis, in reality, they were actually affected very much by the kind of coolness, the image of the country itself. And they would say, oh, I chose Switzerland because I think it's a great market. But turns out they just like Switzerland because it has such a cool image. And so they choose this one over, for example, China, even though maybe China would have been a better market. Another study on strategy was looking at the effects of culture on the entry mode choices. Again, we do measure cultural values of the students. And so there was a professor from India who hypothesized that people from high uncertainty avoidance cultures are more likely to recommend entry modes that are low risk, like licensing, like exporting, versus people from high risk, low uncertainty avoidance countries are more willing to take risk, so like wholly owned subsidiaries. And again, it seems like there is something to it. So the data suggests that yes, culture does affect the decisions that we make. So those are some of the examples, but as I said, these are just examples. So you can do whatever else you want. And as I said, for this hackathon specifically, it's perfectly fine if you wanted to work on some other study. Like again, for example, Natalia has this wonderful paper on typology of and terminology in international tourism. It's a messy set of literature, body of literature, with terminology completely, convoluted, and nobody really knows what they mean when they say, for example, diaspora tourism. The term is used differently in different subfields of the literature. And it seems to me like it would be a huge contribution to the field if somebody could list all those synonyms, explain what the differences are, explain how they use differently in different fields, and then maybe provide a framework and terminology for moving forward so that we, name things the same way. And when somebody says, for example, roots tourism, everybody actually knows what it means. So again, it's not exactly based on the culture data. It's more of a kind of integrative literature review. But again, with some help, I think this study would be published in the top journal and probably will lead to a lot of citations. And I don't see a problem, for example, with her working on that study instead of taking on something brand new based on the culture data. So likewise, all those other disciplines that you mentioned, fashion, for example, or strategy, it seems to me that we definitely totally can pursue those as study ideas for the hackathon, as opposed to specific cultures data on teams or something like that. All right, I'll stop here. And so I don't know, comments, questions, ideas for studies. Would you like to share some observations? Now seems to be a good time for that. Anyone?
So how many companies are participating in this conference, for this conference?
It will be four companies. Actually, one of them is actually not really a company. It is sort of an institution, because it is actually the opera house itself. So it is also a company, but for certain a non-profit one. So it is in a way a company because they are competing with other opera houses in Italy, and they have to sell their tickets, and they rely on the revenues, but in a way they're also untypical because actually 75% of their revenues are coming from other sources. Sponsorship 25% and 50% by government support. Then there will be a company that is called Nuova Simonelli. That is a company that is very export oriented. So they are exporting 95% of their turnover is not from Italy. And they've been having a very sharp growth recently, and they produce coffee machine for espresso. And then we have a company that is close to the fashion industry that is called Eurosuole. And they're a leading company here in the production of sole for footwear. Maybe you don't know, but here in Macerata, actually 1/3 of the footwear that is produced in Italy is produced here in Macerata. Of course, you know Ellie, but maybe other people here don't. So actually, it is a leading company that is supporting footwear producers. And then we have a winery, a small winery, but it is very focused quality, and on bio wine. And so it will be a typical Italian winery that again is also focused on export, just maybe 30%, but they want to grow in international markets. So we are going to have 4. And then as a 5th company, this is not a company that is in the challenges of students, but it is a company that we are going to visit in the afternoon on Tuesday, that is called Iguzzini. That is a very special company because it is working on something very, very intangible. It's also very large. It is the largest in this group. They have a turnover that is around 250 million euro, and they produce lighting systems. So lighting systems, for example, for monuments and for stadiums. They have been working a lot in China, for example. For the Olympics and for special national monuments in China, they've been doing a lot of stuff, but not just in China. For example, the New York memorial for the September 11th has been done by Iguzzini. So they work with light. So these are the companies that we are going to visit on Tuesday, the 30th of July.
If you wanted to do some research right on the spot, so we will have over 100 students, and so we will have what, about 30 teams or something like that, and or 20 teams. And so somebody even suggested that some data could be collected on the site. Maybe we can look and analyze the student dynamics within those teams, the way they present, the choices they make. Again, I'm not sure if it would be a good idea, but if you wanted to, that's also an option. Not to mention, you can do a case study on those specific 5 companies. We will have meetings with the management of the company tours. Again, seems to me like a wonderful opportunity to collect some data and write up something, either a case study or a paper. So I'm not sure if, so it is 10 o'clock, so I'm not sure if we need to go any further, but one last final remark. So what I will do is I will send at the end of this presentation, I will send to you a list of Xculture variables. If you see my screen, I will send you these files here. And so what they are is the list of all the variables that we have in our database. Like for example, so it's multi-level data set, so we have a separate data file for each level of analysis. Like for example, we have a separate data file for what we call the individual level, so the description of the students and what they have to say in those weekly surveys. And we have a team level data set, which describes the teams. And again, anything that we have on teams, like for example, the size of the team, the cultural composition of the team, the quality of the reports the team writes. Then we have an entity that we call class. So here you have the description of the class, of the course. You know, is it MBA or undergraduate level? How many students are in the course? What percentage of the grade is allocated, for example, to Xculture? Is it online or face-to-face, required or optional, and things like that. Then we have an entity specifically on instructors, you know, who the professors are, you know, from their experience to academic pedigree to all kinds of preferences they have as they expressed it in the application and then in the pre and post project surveys. We also have a separate data set on the schools, on the universities, again, mainly the rank of the university and some other data about the university itself, and then the country. So what country they are in, you know, economy, politics, and stuff like that. So you can look at all kinds of different effects, you know, individual, team, class, university, country, professor, and so on and so on. Plus, we have a separate entity for peer evaluations. We have a separate entity for comments and a separate entity for what we call acquaintanceship test. Again, you will look at the data and have more information about it. But for each of those files or each of those entities, we have 2 files. One is what we call the codebook, and one is the actual data. And so here is an example of a codebook for individual level studies. So you would have a list of variables, and that would be this column here. But before we get to that, you have the topic. Like for example, you have some information on team life cycle, some cultural intelligence, team identification, so kind of big topics. And then you have the list of the specific variables that we have here. So for example, when we look at the team efficacy, so we measured it multiple times, multiple ways. So this is the topic. This is the description, what goes into this block. This is the variable names as they appear in the data file. This is the actual question that we asked students to answer. This is the scale on which they were evaluated. Like, for example, in this case, it was from 1 to 100. Then this is the week in which the data were collected. So week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So some of those things were measured every week. Some of those things were measured only once. Some were measured once, and it doesn't really matter what time of the project it was measured. So we just put MA. And then finally, you have information on which semesters those data were collected in. So some variables we would measure every semester, others not every semester, but we have here, you know, how many cases you have in a given semester. So for example, team efficacy apparently was measured in like 5 or 6 different semesters between 2013 and 2015. Then we phased it out and started measuring something else, so it was not available here. Same thing, for example, team identification. We started measuring it in 2014 and basically measured since then with a little drop in 2015-16. So that just to give you an idea of what data are available, when, and how much. So for example, satisfaction with the report, as you can see, it's been measured every single semester, and we have thousands of cases here. For other things, it would be fewer cases. So I will send you those data. Be aware that it's a lot of data. So for example, at the individual level, we have close to 2,000 variables, as you see. At the team level and other levels, it's a little bit less, but a total probably would be close to 2,000 variables. And just reading those original questions will probably take you a couple of days. It's a lot of text, and so don't be overwhelmed, and you don't have to read it all at once. At the very least, maybe take a look through the topics so that you know what kind of variables we measured. A lot of ideas will come to you as you look at what we measured. Like, for example, you will look at cultural values. I didn't realize they measured that. Maybe I should look at how cultural values relate to whatever the answer may be. Or before that, social media perceptions. Oh, I didn't realize they measure what people think about social media. Maybe I should look at that and how it affects something. Or maybe cultural intelligence. Oh, they measured it so many different ways. Maybe I should do some study on, you know, the effects of cultural intelligence on whatever, you know, the topic would be. So as you will be going through these data, you will see that we have quite a wide range of different measures we've taken over the years. And as I said, you probably will have many ideas once you see what we've done. At the same time, if you happen to have a good, interesting idea, but we don't have the data yet, but you think we can collect those data using the Xculture project, it's perfectly fine to think about a study like that. So we can then develop the research design in Italy, working on it on this together, decide what kind of data I needed. Would it be some experimental data? Would it be some survey? Would it be something else, observations? And then in the fall, we can collect those data for you. So this way you will develop the research design in Italy, maybe start working on the literature review and theory development during the fall semester, as well as at that time we will collect the data. And then once you have the data towards the end of the semester, you can run your analysis and, you know, complete the study over the Christmas break, for example. So keep in mind that if it's an interesting idea and the data could be collected using the Xculture project, we probably will be able to collect them for you, as long as it's not too much or as long as the experiments are not too intrusive. So definitely possible to do that as well. All right, so we are way over time. Any maybe last minute questions? Comments?
So what's our agenda the next time?
So I thought, let's do the following. So I will send you the list of all the variables we have. And I suggest that over the next week or so, you start thinking about possible studies that you would like to pursue. It doesn't have to be the final list. I recommend being as inclusive as possible at this stage. So it's better to have 10 ideas than to have none. And then we will have maybe one more meeting before the meeting in Italy. So maybe let's do it next week around same time. And at that time, maybe the focus will be more on brainstorming all possible paper studies, ideas. And so we can share, you know, everybody will say, okay, I thought I would like to work on this, this, and this. And everybody will do it maybe without criticism at this time, just to get an idea of what kind of papers we have in mind. And so the goal of the second webinar could be trying to figure out which of the studies are most promising. I mean, ideally, we would like to, so it's about 10 people who will be in the hackathon, maybe 12. Ideally, we would like to work maybe in co-author teams and maybe have 3, 4, maybe 5 studies on the table. If we end up with too many papers in development, it will be very hard to present them, to discuss them as a group. it will just take too much time. So it may be a good idea to have a long list after the next webinar, and maybe get some idea as to which ideas are most promising and perhaps who wants to work with whom. Again, if you would like to work alone, this is perfectly fine. You don't have to have co-authors. But then at the same time, if you would like to have co-authors, we have enough people that you can explore, who could be an interesting co-author, to work with that. The teams can be formed because you have similar interests. Maybe you have complementary skills. Maybe, the topic is something that, let's say, Mark is not familiar with, but maybe he's very good at the analysis and the tools, and he can run very sophisticated network analysis or some other tests that you don't know how to do. Or vice versa, maybe you can, you have the data, you know what exactly you want to do as far as the methodology, but you need someone who can help with the theoretical framework, so the teams can be formed that way. And so next time we will probably do a broad brainstorming of all possible ideas. And then once we meet in Italy a week later, I guess we can have then a session where we will decide who will do what with whom, and proceed from there. So defining the research question, developing the hypotheses, thinking about the ways to test them. And again, each day we will have a way to, quickly present what you have in mind, get input from the group, and then spend the next day trying to use that input to improve your design. And as I said, maybe even some will have the time to run some analyses. If not, at least we will be able to select the data that you need. And yeah, hopefully we will go home with a very, very clear idea as to what we will do, who will be the co-author, what needs to be done next. Obviously, one of the big benefits of a meeting like this is also personal networking. So it's not all about research as a specific paper, but it's also about professional network. Again, as I said, even in this very webinar, we have people with whom we've been working for years and years. And I don't really know much about them other than just the name. What will happen after Italy, I can guarantee you that we've had enough meetings, so I know that. You will feel like you've known those people forever. And you will definitely be much closer at a personal level, which definitely will help with the professional collaboration. So those of you here with whom we met before, I mean, obviously I would be much, much more comfortable working in the future than those we haven't met in person. So again, that will be a wonderful, benefit of this meeting. And so again, going home, you will have that much closer, personal connection, which will help with paper development. Mark, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a suggestion. We could also exchange outside of a meeting. Can you set up a base camp or something, or any online collaboration tool, so we can have an ongoing conversation between the video conferences?
Right. Let's do that. One thing I suggest we do instead of Basecamp, that is a new tool.
It's just an example.
Right. Maybe let me set up a shared Dropbox as well as maybe Google Docs, where we can have the communication, or maybe, I don't know, Facebook, I guess, is not the best tool. Mark, do you have access to Facebook in China, or do you have?
Yeah. Don't worry about it.
Probably can use all kinds of proxies to get around the restrictions, but maybe we can have that as well. So, and
Facebook, a closed Facebook group is fine too.
Yeah, we can maybe have a little conversation there. Let me set that up too. I see Neha just joined us. Neha Pathak, she's in London, UK. Neha, what city are you in? I'm not sure if she can hear us, but yeah, I'm not sure if it was a time confusion or she was just not available earlier. But again, she's a long-term participant in Xculture, an excellent researcher, and also happens to be a mother of one of the Xculture kids who will also be attending the event. And so he was one of the participants in the project as a student in this track. Extremely smart guy. I mean, you will see it. This Advay guy, and we had a few other ones, 14 years old or something like that. They will beat your master's MBA students, at any presentation. Like those kids, some of them were like, whoa. I mean, literally, they're stronger than some of my MBA students. So you will see those kids and you will be like, whoa, how old are you again? So, I'm not sure if her microphone works, but all right, so then let's stop here.
Okay, can I make a suggestion as well?
Yes, please.
It'd be good to share our CVs amongst us, because I try to get their names in schools.
That's a good idea.
But I'm not sure I follow that a lot.
Maybe I'll set up a shared Dropbox folder, and then if you can add your CV to that folder. So that's a very good idea. It will give us a better idea as to who works on what, and
Right.
where collaboration opportunities exist. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Also talking about networking, one of the things that started happening in mixed culture now, and I'm very, very happy about that, we see more and more collaboration between or among the X-Culture professors on projects not related to X-Culture. So we see a lot of collaboration going on now on things that are completely external to our project, as well as we see a lot of now cross visits. So we have one professor, for example, from France who now teaches in Ecuador at a school of one of the professors who participates in X-Culture. So it's become, so they go like every semester, visit each other. Then we had another professor who spent some time at a sabbatical in Australia, again, met each other through X-Culture, now became colleagues in that sense. We even have now one couple that seems to be very serious for the met through X-Culture, and it looks like it's gonna be a wedding. So, yeah, so they met a few years ago and started communicating, and then it went, you know.
Is this Alfredo?
Was that?
Is this Alfredo?
Yes, yes, yes. So that's our close friend.
Yes.
And wonderful. Why not? I guess, you know, we still don't have X-Culture kids as, you know, like born through X-Culture, but we do have some students who are dating too. So I suppose sooner or later we will have. So, but anyway,
that we know of.
Yeah, what I mean is that the opportunities here are not limited to only, you know, taking a specific data set and writing a specific paper. So it's definitely much more, you know, as I said, professional, personal networking. And it's wonderful. It's wonderful. So that's exactly what we want. So as I said, we are all very international, but at the same time, it's a very, you know, closely knit community. So and I'm glad that we provide that platform for more collaboration. All right, so let me set everything up then online. I will send you an email with the links, and perhaps let's plan on having another webinar before we meet in Italy, maybe sometime next week. And then I guess once we meet in Italy, we'll have much more time for research there. Yeah, thank you again, Ernesto, for organizing it. I know it's been hundreds of hours of work and it's not over yet. So
yes, it has been a pleasure, really.
Thank you.
See you next week.
Yes.
Great.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.